The grand ballroom glowed under chandeliers of pure crystal, each piece catching the light and scattering it like tiny stars. The sound of champagne glasses clinking echoed across the hall, mixing with polite laughter and conversations about million-dollar contracts, stock markets, and international deals. It was a place of wealth, of power, of people who carried themselves like kings. And then, he walked in. A man in a suit that had clearly seen better days. The stitching at the cuffs was loose, the color slightly faded. His shoes were polished, but time had left scars on the leather. His tie wasn't designer, it was his late wife's gift, one he still wore to feel her presence. The room noticed. People always notice when someone doesn't belong. Heads turned, whispers rippled, smiles curved into smirks. Some thought he was the hired help. Others assumed he had entered the wrong event. But he wasn't there by mistake. He was there because destiny had quietly pulled him into this golden room of giants, waiting to test whether his years of sacrifice, humility, and hidden brilliance would finally be revealed. When one of the wealthiest men in the room sneered and asked mockingly, "What could you possibly bring to this table?" The single dad straightened his shoulders, placed his hand gently over his chest, and replied with calm pride. "I speak 9 languages." The billionaire laughed. The crowd chuckled. It sounded absurd. But within minutes, the same laughter turned into stunned silence. His name was Arman. Arman wasn't born into wealth, nor did he marry into it. His story began in a small apartment on the edge of the city. He was a widowed father. His wife, Layla, had died in a tragic car accident when their daughter, Alina, was only 6. Since then, he carried both roles, father and mother, protector and nurturer. He worked relentlessly to provide. By day, he taught at a community center, helping immigrants and refugees learn basic English so they could survive in a foreign land. By night, he scrubbed office floors as a janitor, his back aching, his hands calloused. It was exhausting. Lonely. But whenever he came home and saw Alina's smile, the weight on his shoulders melted. She was his light in the darkness. The father-daughter bond. Every night, no matter how tired he was, Arman tucked Alina into bed. And every night, she begged. "Papa, tell me a story, but in another language." So he did. He told her fairy tales in French. Legends in Arabic. Poems in Italian. Songs in Spanish. Wisdom in Russian. He mixed them all, weaving magic with his words. Alina would giggle and clap her hands. "Papa, you speak like the whole world lives inside you." He would chuckle softly, kiss her forehead, and reply. "My little star, languages are bridges. With them, we can reach anyone's heart." But deep down, Arman often wondered, would the world ever value his gift? Struggles that broke him. The truth was harsh. Employers didn't care about his talent. They cared about degrees, certificates, and connections. When he applied for translation jobs, he was rejected. When he offered to tutor, parents chose more prestigious names. When he suggested cultural training, companies laughed it off. He was invisible. And the bills kept piling up. Rent notices came in red ink. His old car broke down more often than it worked. Some nights, dinner was just bread and tea. One winter evening, he sat in the dark, staring at an unpaid electricity bill. His body was trembling, not from the cold, but from the crushing fear of failing his daughter. Alina, sensing his pain, walked over in her pajamas, her little feet cold against the floor. She placed her tiny hands on his cheeks and whispered, "Papa, don't be sad. Remember what you always say, languages are bridges. Maybe one day, your bridges will take us somewhere better." Her innocent words pierced his heart. He hugged her tightly, tears soaking her hair. That night, he promised himself, "I will not give up. I will keep building my bridges. One day, someone will walk across them." The unexpected invitation. Weeks later, destiny came knocking. At the community center, a wealthy businessman named Mr. Harris visited. He was impressed watching Arman switch fluently between languages as he greeted immigrant families, Mandarin to comfort a mother, Russian to calm a nervous boy, Arabic to explain forms to a father. Harris was stunned. "You have an extraordinary gift. You must come to the Global Business Summit next month. There will be diplomats, CEOs, investors from across the world. Maybe someone will recognize your value." Arman hesitated. That summit was for elites, men in tailored suits, women in diamond jewelry. He owned one old suit, carefully ironed but too worn for such an event. But when he told Alina, her eyes sparkled. "Papa, please go. Maybe this is the bridge you've been waiting for." He smiled weakly and nodded. "For you, my little star, I will go." The night of the summit. The ballroom was dazzling. Glittering chandeliers hung like frozen rain. The air smelled of wealth, cologne, perfume, and money. Arman entered quietly, shoulders squared, heart pounding. People glanced at him, their eyes scanning his worn-out suit before dismissing him. Some thought he was catering staff. Others smirked at his old shoes. Conversations drifted around him, talks of million-dollar mergers, private jets, luxury estates. He felt out of place, but he reminded himself. "I am not here to fit in. I am here to be heard." Then it happened. Mr. Donovan, a billionaire tech mogul known for his arrogance, noticed him. With a mocking smile, Donovan raised his glass and said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "And what about you, sir? You don't look like an investor. What do you bring to this table of visionaries?" The room chuckled. All eyes turned to the single dad. Arman stood tall, his face calm. "I bring bridges. I speak 9 languages." Laughter erupted. It sounded like a bad joke in a comedy club. Some whispered, 9 languages? Who does he think he is? Donovan smirked. 9 languages? And how exactly does that help anyone here make millions? But before Arman could respond, destiny intervened. The shock. One of the international diplomats at the table leaned forward. In flawless Mandarin, he asked, "Is that true? Can you really speak Chinese?" Without hesitation, Arman replied in Mandarin, calm, articulate, respectful. The diplomat's eyes widened. Another man, a Russian oil tycoon, leaned in. He asked a question in Russian. Arman responded fluently, his accent precise, his tone perfect. Gasps filled the room. An Arab sheikh joined in, speaking in Arabic. Arman bowed his head respectfully and answered smoothly. Then came French. Then Spanish. Then Italian. One by one, they tested him. And one by one, Arman answered flawlessly. The laughter died. The smirks faded. Now, the room was silent, awed. Donovan, the billionaire who mocked him, sat frozen, his champagne glass trembling slightly in his hand. For the first time that night, the richest man in the room was speechless. The turning point. Suddenly, Arman was no longer the poor man in the old suit. He became the centerpiece of the summit. Diplomats shook his hand. CEOs rushed to exchange cards. A publishing house offered him a book deal to teach languages. A global corporation, struggling with international negotiations, offered him a consultancy contract with a life-changing salary. But Arman never lost his humility. He bowed his head and said softly, I only wish to use my gift to build bridges between people. That night, he walked home with tears of joy in his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't carrying the world's weight. The world was finally lifting him. A new beginning. Months passed. Arman's life transformed. He bought a modest home for himself and Alina. He no longer worried about bills. He founded a non-profit to teach children languages for free, believing that knowledge should never be limited by wealth. Alina introduced him proudly to her friends. This is my papa. He speaks 9 languages. But more than that, he speaks the language of kindness. And as for Donovan, the billionaire who once mocked him? At the next summit, he walked up to Arman, shook his hand firmly, and said, "You taught me something that night. Wealth isn't measured only in dollars. Sometimes, the greatest fortune is carried in the heart and mind." Arman smiled humbly. True wealth, Mr. Donovan, is when your gift becomes someone else's light. The final message. Arman's story is proof that you should never underestimate someone based on their appearance. Behind tired eyes might be brilliance. Behind a simple smile might be greatness. Behind sacrifice might be an empire of love. And perhaps the most powerful language of all, the one that needs no translation, is kindness. Call to action. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Backhand index pointing right, tell me in the comments, what is your hidden talent, the one the world doesn't see yet? And don't forget, subscribe to Be Kind Always for more powerful, emotional stories that remind us of the strength of the human spirit. Because in the end, kindness is the only language the whole world understands.